Hi, I'm Darian, and I wish I was making this up. I walked in and saw my wife, scissors in hand, cutting chunks of our daughter's hair while she sobbed, begging, "Mom, please, don't do it again." That was the moment everything I thought I knew shattered. But what broke me wasn't just what I saw. It was what I found after. A secret so twisted, so calculated. It made me wonder how long she'd been planning it all. And when I finally dialed 911, I had no idea it would only be the beginning. I still remember the smell of rain on the driveway that night, the way it clung to my coat as I stepped out of my truck. It had been an ordinary Thursday, late paperwork at the plant, a quick stop for groceries, and I was expecting an ordinary evening at home. Maribel would be in her room drawing, Isolde in the kitchen with her podcasts on. Nothing in my body prepared me for the sound I heard when I opened the front door. A scream. Not a sharp squeal or a tantrum, but a raw, cracking sound that stopped me in the hall. My hands tightened on the grocery bag. "Maribel?" I called out, my voice already trembling. No answer. Only another sob, words tumbling through the air like stones. "Mom, please, don't do it again." I dropped the bag on the tile. Apples rolled across the floor. My feet moved before my mind caught up, carrying me down the hallway toward the living room. The door was half shut. Through the gap, I saw Isolde kneeling behind our daughter, one hand clenched around a fistful of Maribel's dark hair, the other holding a pair of scissors. Strands lay scattered on the carpet like tiny black feathers. My daughter was on her knees, face streaked with tears, shaking. "What the hell are you doing?" My voice came out hoarse, almost foreign. I pushed the door open, my shoulders slamming it against the wall. The scissors froze midair. Isolde looked up, her eyes flat, her mouth set. "She needs discipline," she said, as if she were explaining a recipe. "She lied to me. This is how she'll learn." Maribel tried to turn, but Isolde yanked her hair. "Stop!" she cried again. And that word cracked something inside me. This wasn't the first time. I could hear it in her voice. Rehearsed terror. My stomach turned. I stepped forward. Let her go. My hands were out, palms up, a mix of rage and control. "Right now." "She's my daughter too," Isolde snapped. "You're always undermining me. Do you want her to grow up spoiled?" Maribel's sobbing grew louder, a sound that sent me back decades. I saw myself at 8 years old, crouched behind a couch, waiting for someone to step in, and no one did. The carpet under my shoes felt the same, prickly, useless. "Isolde," I said, forcing my voice low, "if you don't drop those scissors, I will call the police." Her hand trembled, but she didn't release her grip. She was breathing hard now, eyes darting from me to Maribel. "Call them," she hissed. "They won't care. It's just a domestic matter." I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911, my thumb pressed harder than necessary. The line clicked. Then a woman's voice, bored, recited the greeting. "My wife is assaulting my child," I said, words sharp and clear. "Right now. She's cutting her hair. She's hurting her." There was a pause, a clatter of keys in the background. "Sir, is anyone in immediate danger?" "Yes," I nearly shouted. "She's holding scissors to my daughter's head." "Okay," the dispatcher said slowly. "We'll log this as a domestic dispute. Officers will respond when available." "When available?" I repeated. "Do you understand she's terrified? She's on the floor. Sir, calm down. Do not escalate the situation." The line felt colder than the rain on my coat. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, but it was like talking to a wall. "Fine," I said. "Send someone." "Please." Maribel clung to my leg now, her small hand shaking. Isolde had finally set the scissors down on the coffee table, but her eyes burned at me, not with guilt, but calculation. The dispatcher asked me to confirm the address. I gave it, every syllable like gravel. The call ended with a promise of someone soon. I lowered the phone and looked at my daughter. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered. She buried her face in my jeans. My hand hovered over her head, afraid to touch where hair had been hacked away. Inside my chest, an old ache rose. I was back in my childhood kitchen, calling for help when my father raised his voice, only to hear my mother say, "Don't make a fuss." I thought I'd buried that boy long ago, but here he was in my own house, holding a phone that might as well have been dead. I straightened, trying to breathe. Isolde stepped back, her face shifting like a mask slipping. You always dramatize everything, she said, her voice suddenly soft, almost wounded. I didn't hurt her. I'm just trying to make her behave. You know how she lies. I met her gaze. This ends tonight, I said quietly. I don't care what you think she's done. This ends. Maribel sniffled, pressing closer to me. My hands were steady now. I knew one thing. If the system wouldn't act fast, I would find another way to protect her. The house felt too small, walls closing in, filled with the metallic scent of cut hair. The scissors lay on the table, a silent threat, a reminder of every ignored plea. I hung up the phone, the dial tone echoing in my ear, and turned back toward Isolde. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But I recognized the look. Not guilt, not shame, performance. The phone was still warm in my hand when I lowered it, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any sound. Isolde sat on the edge of the couch, head bowed, shoulders trembling. To anyone walking in, it would look like a wife, overcome with remorse. But I had lived with her long enough to know when a show was playing. Her tears slid down, glistening under the lamp. Her breathing came in sharp, deliberate pulls like an actress taking cues from an invisible script. I crouched beside Maribel, easing her into my arms. She clung to me so tightly, her fingernails pressed against my skin. I smoothed a palm over her back, murmuring, "You're safe, honey. Stay right here with me." She nodded without looking up. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Isolde glance, not at me, not at Maribel, but toward the corner of the kitchen where our security camera used to sit, except it wasn't there anymore. She'd insisted on disconnecting it last week, saying she didn't like being watched in her own home. In that moment, the decision that had felt like a small marital compromise now felt like a trap. "You're making this look worse than it is," she said, her voice breaking artfully between words. "Darian, you always overreact. You never back me up. She's gotten spoiled. Someone has to teach her respect." Her words rolled through the room like cold air. I tightened my grip on Maribel, but my mind spun. Had I misunderstood? Was I blowing up a moment of bad parenting into something else? I looked down at Maribel. Her face told me everything. This was not a one-time outburst. This was a pattern. Teaching respect? My voice was steadier now. By cutting her hair, by making her beg. "You don't get it." Isolde wiped at her eyes, smearing her makeup like smudged paint. "She lied about where she was after school. She hid things from me. She's been sneaking. You're blind to it because you baby her. Stop twisting this." I rose, pulling Maribel with me, and for the first time I saw fear flicker in Isolde's eyes. Not fear of guilt, but of losing control. I turned away for a second to get Maribel a blanket from the hallway closet. When I came back, Isolde had straightened, her face calmer, eyes sharp. "If you keep undermining me," she said softly, "she'll end up just like those kids on the news. No discipline, no boundaries. You'll regret it." Her tone hit me with a strange déjà vu. I heard echoes of other nights, a slammed door, Maribel's muffled crying when Isolde grounded her for hours in her room, the way she had once flinched when her mom reached for a brush. Back then, I'd told myself I was imagining it. I remembered the neighbor across the street, old Mr. Kellner, chuckling, "Your wife sure keeps your little one in line, doesn't she?" He'd meant it as praise. I'd smiled, uncomfortable. Now those fragments lined up like a row of pins, each one pointing at a truth I'd refused to see. Maribel shifted in my arms, her breathing shallow. I set her gently on the recliner, wrapping the blanket around her. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I knelt to her level. "Has this happened before?" I asked quietly. She shook her head fast, but her lip quivered. That was answer enough. I stood again, looking at the woman I'd married. The living room felt like a stranger's house, the walls too close, the carpet too loud under my feet. I'd spent years smoothing over rough edges, telling myself it was for family peace. Tonight that illusion cracked. "You planned this," I said finally, my voice low. "You unplugged the camera. You made sure nobody would see." Isolde drew in a sharp breath. "How dare you accuse me? You think I'm some monster? Everything I've done is because you won't step up as a father." "That's not discipline," I replied. "That's cruelty." Her lips trembled, but behind her eyes there was steel. We stared at each other across the room, two people who'd shared a bed for years but were now divided by something wider than the space between us. I could feel my own pulse in my temples, not with helplessness but with a rising clarity. For the first time I felt like a guest in my own home, a man watching a play he'd unknowingly bought tickets for. I drew a slow breath, forcing myself not to shout. "This stops now," I said. "I'm not looking away anymore." Isolde gave a soft laugh, bitter and strange. "You're really going to make a scene over a haircut? You think anyone will believe you?" I didn't answer. I just went back to Maribel, brushing the chopped strands from her cheeks. She was trembling less now, but when she finally looked up at me, her eyes were huge, dark pools of something deeper than fear. She opened her mouth as if to speak, hesitated, then whispered a few words that made my heart slam against my ribs. "She's done this before, Daddy. More than once." The words barely left her lips, but they echoed like church bells inside my skull. Loud, slow, impossible to ignore. Maribel's voice was soft, broken between syllables. Her little hand clutched my shirt as if it were the last solid thing in her world. I froze. 1,000 thoughts collided, none of them useful. I wanted to believe I misheard, that she was mistaken, that maybe Isolde had snapped once, just this once. But deep down, the ground was already cracking beneath those lies. "When?" I asked her gently, my throat so tight I almost couldn't get the word out. Her head dipped lower into my chest. "Last summer. And before that, you were working late." Her breath hitched. "She locked me in the laundry room one night because I spilled juice, said I had to learn." I stared at the far wall, not seeing it anymore. The laundry room, a concrete floor, no windows, no clock. And I'd walked past that door, never knowing. "She made me eat dinner in there. Cold spaghetti. I was crying and she said crying was for babies. I wanted you, but she said you didn't care." My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, slow and steady, because what I wanted to do in that moment wouldn't have helped Maribel. I needed to hear everything. "She cut my hair before picture day at school," she whispered. Told me it was punishment because I rolled my eyes when she told me to clean my room. I didn't even mean to. I closed my eyes. That morning came back in vivid color. Maribel walking out of her room with choppy bangs, Isolde brushing it off like it was a fashion choice. "She wanted a new look," she'd said with a smile. "You know how girls are." I had believed it. No, I had wanted to believe it. I opened my eyes and looked at her, my daughter, my child, and I realized I had missed all of it. Or worse, I had chosen to. Her voice cracked again. "She said if I told you she'd make it worse, that she'd make you hate me." Something inside me buckled. I felt it. The guilt, the rage, the helplessness I thought I had buried since my own boyhood. All of it came up like bile, but I kept my arms around her, steady. "You're safe," I said again. "No more secrets. Ever." From across the room, I heard Isolde's voice, sharp, bitter. "Oh, please, now you're letting her make things up. You really think I'm the villain here?" I stood slowly, still shielding Maribel behind me. "She's not making this up." Isolde crossed her arms. "She's always been dramatic. You know that? She's a smart kid. She learns fast, maybe too fast." Her eyes flicked toward our daughter like she was sizing up a rival, not a child. "You cut her hair before school pictures?" I asked. "You locked her in the laundry room?" She didn't answer. Not really. Just narrowed her eyes and shrugged. "You weren't here. Someone had to raise her." "Maybe if you were around more." I stepped forward before I realized my feet were moving. "Don't. You do not get to turn this around on me." Maribel clutched the back of my shirt. "She's lying," Isolde snapped, "and if you can't see that, you're a fool. You've always let her play you." That's when she reached forward, fast and sharp, grabbing Maribel's wrist. "Come here," she barked. "You're not done talking to me." But I was faster. My hand shot out, and I pulled Maribel behind me with one arm, the other raised between us. My voice was calm, too calm. "Don't touch her." Her hand froze in midair. "This isn't a game," I said. "This isn't a parenting disagreement. This is abuse." She blinked. For a moment, the mask faltered. Not enough to show remorse, just surprise that I'd finally named it. And then her voice turned cold. You're ruining this family. No, I said, without raising my voice. You did that a long time ago. I turned to Maribel. Her eyes were red but steady, brave. I saw it now, what I had missed for years, the little silences, the small flinches, the way she used to look at the floor when her mom walked in. She had been surviving in plain sight. I had no plan. I didn't know what would happen next. But I knew this. I was done being the quiet one, done letting things slide for the sake of peace. I wrapped my arm around Maribel and looked back at Isolde. She stood there shaking, but not with guilt, with fury. And in that moment, I told her something I had never dared to say before. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I said. The words didn't come out loud, but they landed like a hammer in the middle of the room. Isolde froze, her posture stiff, like I'd just struck something deep inside her that she didn't think I had the courage to touch. Maribel stayed behind me, her grip on my shirt still tight. I could feel her breath, short and nervous against my back. I placed my hand over hers to let her know I wasn't going anywhere. I mean it, I said again, louder this time. You touch her again, you'll regret it. I surprised myself with the tone. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't panicked. It was cold, final. It didn't come from my throat, it came from my spine. Isolde tilted her head slightly, her lips curling at the corners. Oh, wow, she said slowly, dragging each word. Look at you, playing hero now. Her voice didn't match the moment. No yelling, no panic, just a calm, snake-like purr that unsettled me more than if she'd screamed. You're really going to turn this into a battle? She asked. Over a tantrum? My heart pounded, but I didn't blink. She crossed her arms and took a step closer, not toward me, toward Maribel. You really think you can just walk around this house like the noble father now? Where have you been when the bills needed paying? When she threw fits and slammed doors and called me names? Huh? I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Her words were just more smoke. She'd always been good at that, taking a clear moment and muddying the water with just enough poison to make you question yourself. But not this time. She stepped back and walked toward the kitchen, opening the fridge with practiced calm. You think you're strong, she said, retrieving a bottle of water, twisting the cap and taking a sip. But strength doesn't win in court. Proof does. And who do you think they'll believe? The mother holding things together or the father who's suddenly outraged after 10 years of silence? That hit me in the chest. She was already thinking ahead. Not about us. Not about Maribel. She was running calculations. If she cried on the stand, if she twisted the story, if she framed this as a domestic disagreement, the whole truth could vanish into legal fog. You don't scare me, I said. Not anymore. You should be scared, she said evenly, because if you push this, you'll lose. You'll lose her. You'll lose this house. You'll lose me. I almost laughed at that last one. But I didn't. Instead, I turned to Maribel, crouching down in front of her. You okay, sweetheart? She nodded, barely. Isolde leaned against the counter, arms folded. You really want to play the victim card now, after ignoring half of what goes on in this house? You think this is a game? I asked, standing back up. Oh no, Darian, she said with a smirk. You started the game. I'm just better at playing it. She walked toward the hallway, slow and deliberate, then stopped as she passed me, leaned in close, too close, and whispered, You're not as strong as you think. We'll see who the court believes. And with that, she disappeared down the hallway, heels clicking like punctuation on a warning I couldn't unhear. I stood still for a moment, letting the silence settle again. The TV was still on in the corner, muted. Some sitcom was playing, people laughing at canned jokes while my world cracked open. Maribel sat on the couch now, knees pulled to her chest. I went to her, sat beside her. She leaned into me without saying a word, and I knew something had shifted. This wasn't going to end in this house. It was going to bleed into courtrooms, school offices, maybe even into the hands of people I used to call friends. But I didn't care. I wasn't going back to silence. This wasn't just about one night or one haircut. This was about who I was going to be moving forward, about what kind of father I wanted to be, what kind of man. And that's when I made the call that would change everything. I walked to the kitchen, still trembling, and picked up my phone from the counter where I'd left it earlier. Maribel sat on the couch, curled into the smallest version of herself. her eyes watching me like I was the only piece of solid ground in a house crumbling beneath her feet. I dialed. 911, what's your emergency? My wife, I said, my voice tight and low. She's hurting our daughter. I need help. Now. The dispatcher asked for the address, and I gave it. I could barely feel my fingers. My other hand gripped the edge of the sink, steadying myself as my knees threatened to give out. Are you in immediate danger? My daughter is, I snapped. Please, just send someone. We'll dispatch officers to your location. Stay on the line if it's safe. I hung up. I didn't want Isolde hearing anything else. I turned to Maribel. She hadn't moved. They're coming, I told her gently. The seconds after that call were long and sharp. The kind of waiting where you hear every little sound, the click of the fridge, the hum of the heater, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. My heart beat in my ears. I kept my eyes on the front door, like I was willing help to walk through it. When the red and blue lights finally spilled across our front yard, I thought, for a split second, that maybe this would be the moment it all turned around. But when I opened the door and saw the two officers standing under the porch light, something in me pulled back. Maybe it was their expressions, neutral, unreadable, or maybe it was just the sinking feeling that hope is a fragile thing, too easily broken. They stepped inside. Mr. Crow? Yes, thank you for coming. Isolde appeared from the hallway just then, disheveled, but not panicked. She paused when she saw them. And then, just like flipping a switch, her face crumpled. Oh, thank God, she cried, voice trembling. I didn't know what he was going to do. What? I blinked, stunned. She walked slowly toward the officers, hands slightly raised like she was trying to show she meant no harm. He's been yelling, pacing. I didn't feel safe. And he's turning our daughter against me. Maribel stood behind me. She's lying, she said under her breath, barely audible. Sir, one officer said, can we talk to you outside for a moment? I hesitated but nodded. On the porch, the air was cooler now. Night had deepened. The officer didn't look angry, just tired, experienced, worn from years of scenes like this. She says you've been threatening her, he said plainly. That's not true, I replied. I've never laid a hand on her, but she's been abusing our daughter, cutting her hair, locking her in rooms. Tonight was just the first time I caught her in the act. Does the child have marks? Bruises? No, but she's terrified. That should count for something. The officer exhaled. Sir, I'm not saying I don't believe you, but these situations get messy, fast. If this escalates and she files something, it could affect custody. I'm just advising you. Be smart. Inside, Isolde had switched fully into character. She was now sitting on the couch, a tissue in hand, dabbing at imaginary tears. Her voice was soft but pitched just high enough for the other officer to hear. I've tried so hard to keep this family together, but he's become so angry lately. Maribel gripped the stair rail like it was a lifeline. She turned to me as I walked back in. Don't let them take me, she whispered. I won't, I whispered back. But I didn't know if that was a promise I could keep. The officers talked to both of us, separately, then together. Maribel was sent upstairs while they assessed the situation. They never asked her what happened. Not directly. Not that I saw. Eventually, they told me there wasn't enough cause to make any arrest or remove anyone from the home. Keep things calm tonight, one of them said. File a report tomorrow if necessary. They left. The flashing lights disappeared down the street. The house returned to its false quiet. Isolde closed the door and turned to me. Nice try, she said, but you just made things worse for yourself. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I walked into the hallway and sat down on the floor, back against the wall. My arms rested on my knees, my head dropped. For the first time, I thought maybe I'd already lost. This wasn't about the truth anymore. It was about control, about who could spin a better story. And she had years of practice, a head start, a smile that could melt ice for strangers and slice through steel at home. I felt like I was drowning, but somehow still expected to keep someone else afloat. My daughter. Everything inside me wanted to scream, to punch a wall, to grab my keys and run, but I stayed right there, on that cold floor, breathing through the wreckage. And just when I thought all hope was gone, I discovered something she hadn't counted on. The house was silent again. The kind of silence that doesn't soothe, just stings. After the officers left, Isolde lingered downstairs, victorious in her own sick way, humming to herself as she refolded the throw pillows on the couch, like she'd just hosted guests, not spun lies that nearly tore our daughter from me. I tucked Maribel in, her small hands still gripping my sleeve. "Daddy, don't let her near me tonight," she whispered. "I won't," I said, brushing the hair she had left from her face. "I'll keep you safe. I swear it." I stayed by her side until her breathing steadied, though I knew she wasn't truly asleep, just trying to escape the night the only way a child could, by pretending it wasn't happening. I closed her bedroom door softly and stepped back into the hallway. That's when the weight of everything hit me all over again. The officer's indifference, Isolde's performance. The way the system tilted instantly in her favor, not even bothering to check Maribel's arms or ask about the bruises that didn't show. I stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the floor, then began to pace. Every word she'd said to those officers echoed in my head. How precise she'd been, how quick, how calm. It hadn't just been instinct, she had a script. The thought stopped me cold. She was too polished, too ready. That wasn't fear, it was strategy. She knew exactly what to say because she'd rehearsed it, maybe even planned it. And if she planned it, maybe she'd left something behind. My feet moved before my brain could finish the thought. I crossed the house to her home office, a place I usually avoided like the plague. Not out of respect, but because it always felt more like a fortress than a workspace. It was the one room in the house that still smelled like her perfume and control. I flipped on the lamp, careful not to make noise. The desk was neat. Too neat. That in itself told me there was something hidden. I started with the obvious: drawers, file cabinets, bills, insurance papers, old Christmas cards, nothing useful. But something about the bottom drawer didn't sit right. It looked flush, but when I pressed the left side gently, it clicked. False panel. Inside, tucked behind that false front, was a folder. I pulled it out, heart hammering. The label read, "Family Journal, Maribel." Inside were loose-leaf pages written in a childlike scrawl, but it wasn't Maribel's handwriting. I knew her E's, her backwards B's. This was an adult's imitation. I flipped through quickly, page after page of disturbing entries. Daddy yelled again today. Daddy said I couldn't have dinner. I think I'm scared of him. All lies, all carefully constructed. I stood there, stunned, feeling the floor tilt beneath me. Then I noticed a second item further back in the drawer, a burner phone, cheap, unassuming. I turned it on. There were voice memos. I played the first one, a man's voice, my voice, yelling, accusing, angry, but it wasn't right. The cadence was off, stitched together like some Frankenstein edit of real conversations I'd had over the years, cut, clipped, rearranged, designed to paint me as dangerous. Another file, Isolde's voice, whispering as if to a diary app. He's unstable lately. I'm scared for Maribel. It wasn't just manipulation, it was architecture. She had built a house of lies, brick by brick, and she thought I'd never look close enough to see the mortar. I stared at the phone. My reflection shimmered faintly in the black screen, eyes hollow, jaw clenched. She was preparing to destroy me, but not tonight. I took out my phone, snapped photos of every page in the fake journal. Then I sent them to my cloud. I copied the recordings, uploaded them, and hid the burner phone in a locked toolbox in the garage, somewhere she'd never think to check. When I returned to the office, I replaced everything just as I'd found it. As I turned off the lamp and stepped back into the hallway, something had changed in me. The grief hadn't left, but it had found its partner, resolve. She thought I'd crumble under the weight of her deception, that I'd cave like I had so many times before. But she made one mistake. She underestimated how far I'd go to protect my daughter. And when she realized her secret was gone, the war between us truly began. The next morning arrived gray and quiet, like the calm after a storm that hadn't truly ended. I sat at the kitchen table with a half-full mug of coffee, steam curling upward but long forgotten. I wasn't drinking it. I was watching her. Isolde moved through the kitchen like nothing had shifted. She buttered her toast, checked her phone, wiped the counter unnecessarily, but I saw it, the faint twitch in her jaw, the stiffness in her steps. She was stalling. At precisely 8:12 a.m., she walked toward her study. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. From where I sat, I could hear the desk drawer slide open. Then silence. Then a loud thump as it slammed shut. A beat passed. Then another. She reappeared in the doorway, her face pale and tight, eyes scanning the room like a cornered animal. "Where is it?" she demanded. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. I said, my gaze met hers, steady, cold. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. That silence, it was louder than any accusation I could have thrown back. And it landed harder. Her mouth opened to say something else, but nothing came. She turned abruptly and stormed back into the office, slamming the door behind her. By noon, the retaliation came. My phone buzzed with an email. From her lawyer. Subject, emergency petition for protective order. Filed. I read it 3 times before the words stopped blurring. She was accusing me of being emotionally unstable, of controlling behavior, of being a threat to the child's safety. I felt the floor tilt again. This wasn't panic, it was war strategy. She was firing her next shot before I could make a move, taking legal ground, social ground, everything she could reach. This wasn't about justice, it was about domination. And she'd planned every step. I didn't yell, didn't pace. Instead, I sat back in the chair, rubbed my jaw, and opened a new document. My counterplan had to start somewhere. By 2:45 p.m., I was pulling into the school parking lot. Maribel ran toward me the moment she spotted my car. She clung to my side tighter than usual. I held her close, resting my hand gently on her back. That's when I heard them. 2 mothers near the crosswalk, voices just low enough to pretend it wasn't gossip. Isn't he the one, the dad who, freaked out? I heard they had the cops over last night. Poor little girl. I didn't look at them, just kept walking. But inside, my stomach was on fire. Isolde's version of the truth was already spreading, quiet, venomous, effective. She was poisoning the well before I even reached it. Maribel looked up at me. Did I do something wrong? I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. I knelt down to her level, took her face gently in both hands. Never, I said. Not one thing. She nodded, but I could see the fear still floating behind her eyes. Like she already knew the world could twist truths to hurt the innocent. We got into the car and drove home in silence. She held my hand the entire ride. That evening, as I made her dinner and helped with her homework, I could feel the pressure building again, like the walls were inching closer. But I didn't cave. I cleaned the dishes, checked her homework, tucked her in. Then, when the house was dark again, and the only sound was the tick of the hallway clock, I sat down at my laptop. And I made a choice. Not to strike first, but to strike smart. I would gather everything, witnesses, messages, timelines. I would build a case not with fury, but with facts. If she wanted war, she'd get it. But I'd fight it with truth, not with lies. And that's when I chose the one moment, the one room where she'd never see me coming. 1 week later, that moment arrived. Family court, room 304. Nothing dramatic, just old wood paneling, scuffed tile floors, a faint smell of paper and burned coffee. But to me, it felt like the center of the universe. Every breath, every glance, every word about to be said, it all led here. I sat on the left side of the courtroom. My lawyer leaned over, whispering something about just stay calm and timing is everything. But my eyes were locked on her, Isolde. She sat across from me in a crisp navy blue suit, her makeup flawless. Like always, she was perfectly curated for sympathy. Her lawyer patted her hand. She nodded demurely, glancing at the judge with practiced fragility. She was ready for war, dressed like peace. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I stood last. My hands were steady, but the ache in my chest was constant. Maribel. I had to hold the line no matter how bad it got. The hearing began. Her lawyer moved fast, opening with words that had been sharpened for weeks. Your Honor, my client has endured emotional intimidation and mental abuse from the man sitting across this courtroom. She fears for the well-being of her child, and today she is requesting full custody of Maribel Crow. Then came the documents, printouts of doctored emails, a diary written by Maribel that painted me as a volatile, paranoid father. Edited recordings, just enough of my voice to make it sound like I was yelling, just enough to plant doubt. And of course, Isolde's tears. Silent at first. Then a single sob as she whispered, I just want to feel safe again. I saw the judge glance my way, his brow creased, and for a moment everything tilted. I could feel the courtroom turning, not from what was true, but from what looked believable. My lawyer glanced at me. I gave a small nod. Time. I stood. Your Honor, I said, my voice clear but not raised, with respect, I have evidence that will shift this conversation. The judge waved me forward. I handed over the first piece, a flash drive. Inside, you'll find unedited recordings from the same phone those clips were taken from. The entire conversations, not the trimmed versions. My lawyer distributed printed transcripts, including one with timestamps, where Isolda's voice was unmistakable, berating our daughter, mocking her cries. I continued, handing over another folder. This is the diary submitted. It's a forgery. We had a handwriting analysis done, 3 samples, all concluding the handwriting isn't Maribel's, it's my wife's. Gasps. Audible ones. I watched the courtroom shift again, back toward truth. Last, I presented the photos, the folder as I'd found it, hidden in the locked drawer, alongside the burner phone, all time-stamped. Isolda's lawyer flipped through the pages rapidly, color draining from her face. And that's when Isolda cracked. You think anyone will believe you over me? She snapped, rising without being called. I'm the mother. I've been protecting her from you for years. The judge didn't flinch. His gavel came down, sharp and final. Enough, he said. Isolda's voice faltered. Her lip quivered, but not from rehearsed grief, from fury, fear. Her mask, the one she'd polished and worn for so long, shattered right there. The courtroom was silent. Even the clerk had stopped typing. And for the first time in this entire nightmare, I saw something new in her eyes. Uncertainty. She'd never expected I'd fight back. Never imagined I'd be standing here with evidence, with calm, with fire still burning behind my restraint. The judge took a breath, looked from her to me. This court will take a recess, then we will reconvene for temporary custody recommendations. I nodded. Slowly sat back down. As I did, I looked over to the gallery. Maribel wasn't there, too young to be dragged into this, but I thought of her anyway, her little voice, her trust in me. This was for her. And when the gavel struck for the final time, I realized winning came with a price I hadn't prepared for. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the echo of those final words stayed with me. Full custody awarded to the father. No applause, no sense of victory, just me standing there holding a file of proof and a hollow ache in my chest. Isolda didn't say anything as she left, just let out one last sharp cry of outrage in the hallway before slamming the door behind her. It didn't matter. She'd lost the legal war, but the emotional wreckage she left behind, that was mine to clear. A few weeks passed before we settled into the new apartment. Just a second-floor walk-up in an older building across town. No garden, no fireplace, no marble countertops like the old house. But none of that mattered. What we had now was ours. And more importantly, it was quiet. I remember the first night we spent there. The way Maribel tiptoed from room to room like she wasn't sure it was real. She held onto her backpack like it was a lifeline. I showed her the small room I'd set up for her, soft blankets, a lamp with stars, a bookshelf half full. That night, I cooked grilled cheese. She sat at the tiny table in the corner of the kitchen, swinging her legs under the chair. I put the sandwich down in front of her, and she smiled, just barely, but it was there. No screaming, no accusations, just melted cheese and 2 people trying to start over. Later, I brushed her hair. What was left of it, anyway. She'd started to lose more since the night the police came. The doctor called it stress-induced alopecia. I called it something else. Proof of how much she'd endured, of how much I'd missed. But that night, she slept through. No midnight cries, no sitting bolt upright, clutching her chest, just steady breathing and soft moonlight through the blinds. And I sat outside her door for hours, just listening to it. Some things, though, don't fade as quickly. One morning, as I was trimming a loose thread from her dress with scissors, she flinched so hard the chair scraped across the floor. Her eyes went wide, breath caught in her throat. I dropped the scissors immediately. Hey, I said gently, kneeling down. You're safe. Okay, just fixing your dress. She nodded slowly, then whispered, Will she come back? It broke something in me. I put a hand on her shoulder and looked her in the eye. Not while I'm here, I told her. Not ever again. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. Some things leave with a suitcase. Others stay behind, invisible but heavy. Still, every morning, I packed her lunch, walked her to school, waited at the gate when she came out. Every night, I read her stories, asked her what made her happy that day, even if the answer was just the chocolate milk was cold, because that was something. And in our new world, something was everything. A few nights ago, after she'd gone to bed, I stood by the window with a cup of decaf and watched the city lights. I thought about who I used to be, the quiet man, the stable one, the guy who stayed silent to keep the peace. But silence doesn't always keep the peace. Sometimes it hands it over to the wrong people. And I realized then that justice isn't just about court dates and documents. It's about being there every day, showing up when it's hard, speaking when it counts, listening when it hurts. Maribel didn't need a perfect father. She needed a present one, a patient one, a man willing to rebuild, one steady brick at a time. And as I tucked her in that night, pulling the blanket up under her chin, I kissed her forehead and whispered a promise not just to her, but to myself. Silence would never again be my prison. It would be her protection.